Conversation with the candidate continues right now.
Thank you for clicking on our extended conversation with the candidate, with Republican Mike Rogers, a former longtime member of Congress from Michigan. The next 30 minutes is all commercial free. We're going to try to get to as many questions from our audience of New Hampshire voters as we possibly can. We're going to start things off with Laura Landerman Garber.
Welcome to New Hampshire. Hope you're enjoying your visit.
It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Good. I have a separate question, but I do want to thank you for your prioritizing mental health. I'm a psychologist here working with kids, and I'm in complete agreement with you on that.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. How much work do we have to do? Oh, my Lord.
A lot of work. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania as part of the Tree of Life Synagogue community. I went to nursery school there. I got married there. My children were named there. And the trial that is happening right now is bringing back a lot of memories that my community there and my community here in New Hampshire is still shattered. I still have fears when I go to synagogue, as many communities do, faith communities as well. I'm wondering if we might have had red flag laws, if we might have had background checks, if that could have prevented those and others, like the one recently in a Christian elementary school in our country, if we could have avoided those tragedies. What are your strategies? What are your strategies? I'm sorry, for all of this.
Yeah. So I'm a proponent of the Second Amendment, but I will tell you this: we have a violence problem in America, and it's not just showing up at your synagogue or the church. It's shoving people off the train off the stand in New York. It's stabbings. It's driving your car through a crowded group of people. And if you look at the root cause of every one of those, there's a mental health component to each and every one of them. How do we intercede, or as a law enforcement guy, how do you get there earlier? It would be my argument. How do we do this? How do we get those kids? And if there was a background check that I could have that gives people due process, you don't want the system to beat you down, but you do have to have some way of saying this person is experiencing some mental distress and should not have the opportunity right now to buy a firearm. And it's that bad. Our mental health is that bad in America. You see it. And you're seeing, if you're working with kids, then you know how much that's been pushed down by grades. You're talking second graders, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders are having this mental health distress in their life. So I would find ways to attack that problem first. Now, I happen to think reading is a part of it. I know, bear with me. If you don't read by the fourth grade, at the fourth grade level by the fourth grade, you have a 70% chance of either being in prison or being on welfare when you graduate. Think of that. Right, and so that also causes mental distress. I spent some time in a prison down in. I should rephrase that. I spent some time at the prison in South Carolina. I can see that headline. Adam's going to run with that. And talking to them about this issue about reading and mental health, and is there a way? And they will tell you the reason people don't want to even take their GED because they can't read. Right? And so we're finding ways, creative ways of reading reclamation, getting them reading at grade level, giving them dignity back. I think that's how we get at this problem, honestly. We're going to fight about these things that, candidly, I will tell you, will not make a hill bit of difference. It may make people feel better. It may make you have an emotional moment of, yes, we've done something. It will not solve the problem. There are 330 million guns on the streets of America, right? People are going to get guns if they want to get guns. We have to get there earlier in this process.
How would you feel about appointing a mental health czar to help with this when you're in the White House?
Yeah, I wouldn't be objective. I'm trying not to grow government, but I would certainly reconfigure something else the government doesn't do, which is a lot, even though they pay people to do it. Right? I mean, we have a huge ineffective government, and so this might make sense. And what we have to do is change the stigma of talking about mental health, right? Because clearly not talking about it or not talking about it is not working, right? Nobody wants to talk about this topic. I can't tell you how many places give me the cross eyes when I start talking about our mental health challenges with our next generation of children. So maybe that's would be the right way to do it.
Give a call. I'll be available.
I love that. I mean, you know what? I would love to talk to you about what you're seeing with children.
I will.
And
That'd be great.
yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Congressman, we have another viewer question that's come in here. This one from Charles Dowd. He asks, what are your top priorities that you would employ to get spending under control?
Love this one. So let me give you a couple of examples. Right now I'm going to talk about the one that nobody wants to talk about, but Medicare is going to go in cash deficit by 2028, according to their last study. 2028, not 2035. We're worried about Social Security, that's 2035. Medicare, 2028. And so there are some really great, I've been in the tech side of business for the last 7 years. And the innovation and creativity is really inspiring. And when I looked back at the government, I thought, this place is a 19th century built government trying to solve a 20th century problem in the 21st century. There is no technology brought in to help us get through this, no innovation. So in Medicare, what if the government was no longer the provider, which doesn't work very well, right? High instances of fraud, paperwork, bureaucracy. What if we said, we want you to be a customer? Some of the best performing plans in Medicare are Medicare Health Advantage plans. And here's why. Because the Medical Health Advantage plan has a capitated rate, meaning you can't earn any more than this. And it makes those plans help you manage your health. Great example, they have nurses. If you have diabetes and you're not taking your medicine, somebody comes out and knocks on your door and says, hey, we really kind of need you to take your medicine and be healthy because you're going to cost us a lot of money. It's that old incentive of being engaged in both the outcome and your health outcome. We think this would save billions and billions of dollars. There is actually another piece of technology, and I would go through department to department, by the way, to do this. Talk about the VA for a second. There are some great studies now with, I know everyone's afraid of AI. We shouldn't be, right? We should master AI, just not let it run our lives. In these cases, imagine if a doctor showed up at your bedside and it's like 100 doctors showing up at your bedside because all of that information is in one place. So the doctor doesn't have to think about it or go read a manual. He says, here's the way my patient is presenting to me. What are the 100 doctors through this AI algorithm, because it happens like that, what are you seeing, how are you treating it for the best outcome? What they found in the test study, the beta test study, was that hospital rehospitalization just absolutely dropped through the floor, right? Because you're getting the best care based on all of this wisdom from all of these doctors. And so and we think that, by the way, is about a 10% savings in the way that we would have to pay for the VA, right? And so it's creative. We can actually do this. We can do the Medicare thing. It doesn't impact, matter of fact, services go up, no cuts in costs. Everybody's talking about cuts and all. We don't need to do that. We need to make it more efficient. Do it for the VA. Same with the Pentagon, by the way. Think of this. $125 billion over 5 years. They said, well, we can't find it. Right? $125 billion. Walmart will know if you walk out of a store down the street with a roll of toilet paper. They know it right there. We can't account for $125 billion. It is because it's old, it's antiquated, they have different silos. What we need to do is say, hey, you know what, U.S. military, we want you to have the best equipment, the best people. My son's in the military, United States Navy officer. We want you all to have the best to stand up and defend the United States. You can't waste money to do it. All right, we're going to have to get sharp about how we spend our money. That's the way I would do it. I would go right down the list. Every department can be modernized in the U.S. government. It now takes about 20 average New Hampshireans, Granite Staters, to pay for one federal employee inside of the Beltway. How many think that you're getting your money's worth? Right? Not happening. Right? And it's because we just keep getting bigger. We keep pouring money in the top of the spout and hope it works out all right. It doesn't. It's going to take real reform. Every department, every rule, regulation's got to go that doesn't make sense. And here's the good news. There are examples of all of this that we can apply to this. So this means that we can actually accomplish it within a short order story. But we have to be invested in that outcome.
Let's get to our next question from J.P. Marzullo.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for your service, and your son picked the right branch, by the way.
I was an Army guy. I don't know how I was such a failure. He went into the Navy. We're allowed to pick on each other.
As China continues to be a threat in the world, what would you do to prevent other countries and their attacks on the United States? What kind of security would you set up, and is it feasible?
Yeah, I do think it's feasible, and it's an absolute must-do. And this is where I worry about this, and I'll set this up quickly this way. So think about what's happened in the last 6 months. We had a Chinese spy balloon gently float across the United States, snapping up pictures and sending those messages to satellites. We have had the Russian Air Force downed an international airspace, an unmanned aerial vehicle by the United States, right? Those are forehead flicks. That's China flicking us in the forehead. That's Russia flicking us in the forehead. Not a lot of talk, but we lost 5 U.S. soldiers that were killed in Syria by Iranian proxy forces. They flew drones into their encampment and unfortunately killed 5 very brave soldiers. By the way, who were fighting ISIS? Remember them, right? They're still there. They would still like a piece of us. They were there doing, really God's work trying to protect us. If you think about what Xi was doing with Putin, right, flicking the forehead. If you think about what China is saying they're going to do to the U.S. Currency global reserve, right? Most people, they're like, yeah, who cares? It does impact our standard of living. We get to dictate a lot financially in the world and how it works based on our values. China says they're going to try to take that away from us. And Brazil just came out and said, we agree. Russia's already agreed. It's called the BRICS nations, B-R-I-C, if you want to remember it. It's Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The last holdout on that is India. You watch how fast that goes. They're already talking about trading in the yuan. That means our children are going to have a different kind of a fight. So here's what we got to do. You have to push back everywhere. We have to re-establish our supply chains here in the United States. We should not be dependent on critical materials of any sort on the Communist Party of China. It doesn't mean we can't sell them stuff. In Michigan, we sell a lot of Buicks in China. I don't know why. They love Buicks, and we're happy to sell them. They're wonderful cars. We ought to be selling things all over the world, but what we can't do is be over-reliant. We need to do the same kinds of things that they do in an American version way. They subsidize companies to artificially compete against U.S. companies everywhere in the world. We have it's called an XM Bank. We have 0 loans for industries that we believe are important for our national security, but also sell things like airplanes and computers and other things to be at least competitive to Chinese products. The difference is they don't have to pay it back to the Chinese Communist Party. Ours are going to have to pay us back, but it gives them an opportunity to compete. We've abandoned all of that, and I think that's a serious mistake for us. You know how we're going to beat China? Competition, business, free enterprise, capitalism. That's how we're going to beat them. And then we're going to also make sure that our military is ready to respond. And I'm nervous about this. If you talk about folks in the Navy, they'll talk about those hypersonic missiles. They get a little bead of sweat on their forehead about what those things can and can't do. The fact that they're competing with us in space is concerning. And the way they keep saying they're going to compete against the U.S. Navy anywhere in the world, they just surpassed the number of ships of the United States of America, right? So we're kind of sleeping at the switch. And again, this is that small politics thing. Our politics has gotten so small, we forgot to see we have big problems on the horizon. We got to just shake ourselves out of it, and we can solve every one of these. But that's the way I do it. I do it economically, diplomatically, militarily, and I don't mean, as in shooting. I just mean making sure you're the biggest, baddest guy on the block. Nobody wants to mess with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Next question comes from Mark Boyd.
Congressman, thank you for taking our questions and being
thank
so
you.
candid. We appreciate it. I work.
My wife says, don't be so candid, by the way.
They all do.
Yeah, and they'd be right.
I, along with many in New Hampshire, have worked hard our entire lives and have paid into Social Security. Now I and we are counting on it for our retirement because I earned it. How will you protect Social Security for us, our children, and our grandchildren?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And I think I would start 2 ways. Social Security's 2035, got problems. Medicare's 2028. I think you got to hit Medicare first, get that fixed. Then what I would do with Social Security, I would go through, we have to be very careful about, they went through this huge phase where they were giving out disability, Social Security disability. And they had no catch in that where somebody said, hey, I'm back now, I can go to work or I can't go to work. that balloon, that was the largest growing part of Social Security. I would go back and say, okay, we just have to, if you deserve it, you should have it. But if you don't deserve it, listen, we don't want to risk people who have worked their whole lives, paid into this system, can't get what they paid in. I think we have to do that. And then we're going to have to take, every option is going to have to be on the table. If you're 3 years old today, and your life expectancy is 110 or whatever it's going to be now, it's in the 90s now. We're just going to have a rethink about what work looks like and what retirement looks like. Doesn't mean that's the right answer, but it means we have to talk about it. So I think the immediate impact we could have is eliminating fraud. And again, by the way, technology does that, helps us tremendously on this. And then the other piece is this. I talked to a doctor for a long time who said that the system is rigged to give the check but never actually reclaim it back when you're healthy. We ought to change that. I mean, we want you to get help when you need it, but you need to step back and give it to the people who earned it and paid in and retired, get that money back. We think that can help make it solvent for years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Quick follow-up question for you there, Congressman. You were in Washington, I believe, when the Bush administration tried to do something about Social Security, and that turned out to be not a great political experience for them. What did you learn from that?
Well, I just don't think, I think Americans see Social Security very different than their personal investments, and they don't want to see them intertwined. And I'm not sure that's the wrong answer, honestly. I mean, it is not the best system for retirement. If pure and simple, if you could invest some money and get Social Security, that's probably financially over the duration of the fund is the best way to do it. But Americans aren't there, and I don't think you should change it if Americans aren't there. I just don't think it's helpful. I think you're stressing out people who don't need to be stressed, and they're getting close to retirement or they're on it. And if any kind of confusion you inject in there is not healthy. If they wanted to look at something for 50 years from now, or 60 years from now, or 70 years from now, maybe they should have that conversation. And here's the other thing I would do in Social Security, by the way, to answer that question. Because of that experience that I learned, you're going to do a commission, and there's going to be equal Democrats and equal Republicans. And you're going to close the door and say the media doesn't get to go in until they come out with a decision. And I'll tell you why. And my wife suggested that we should all feed them beer for a while, too, with no bathroom breaks. That might do it. Part of the problem is this is such a political issue, a rail issue, that you can't have an honest conversation about how to fix it. And I think we're going to have honest conversations of how to fix it. We may disagree, it's okay, we may never even come to a conclusion, but we have to at least have the conversation, and right now they're not having it. So I would have that equal panel, and don't make one more of the other team than one team. I wouldn't do it. Equal teams, pick people who don't want to run to the TV and say, I'm the only one saving Social Security, right? And everyone else wants to steal your money. That person ought to be off, right? It should be a serious body doing serious work to see what kind of recommendations they could come up with that we should then talk about. Because I think there's probably a lot more in there because we never really look at it, because everyone's so afraid to look at it. There's probably some solutions in there that would make sense, and we could all go, that kind of makes sense to me. But we'll never get there if we don't take away this political third rail conversation.
Let's get to the next question from Carolyn Morrill.
Hi there, thank you for being here. We've discussed a number of different situations. If you were president, what would you do as your top #1 priority that you'd like to get done that you feel that you could get accomplished?
Yeah, I would make us energy independent yesterday. And part of the reason is, if you noticed, our politics has gotten mucked up in not being energy independent. And by the way, I tell my green friends this. If you want to get to a carbon-free economy, you have to make us energy independent today. We need combustion engines for some period of time. So making this artificial kind of ugly process that we have to go through to get there is not going to help us invest in technology that will give us the next generation of electric vehicles. Listen, if you live in, I'm sure this is the same in New Hampshire, why I think this is important. And you're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and you do logging, and you do other things, or you do any kind of construction work, an electric vehicle probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you today, right? And by the way, cold weather drops the range on these batteries, right? So my argument is, everybody calm down. What we should do is say, we're going to do two things. Be energy independent tomorrow. That way we don't have to send a president to Saudi Arabia to beg for oil. I think that was embarrassing, should never do it. Embarrassing for the United States, given that we have that capability here. And it also would have changed the difference in the natural gas conversation in Europe, right? If we'd have not turned all these things off, we would have had better solutions for even the conflict in Europe and our friends in Germany and Poland and other places. So I would, do energy independent. The other part is you need to unleash American ingenuity again. You know, this pile of regulations that keeps coming is not helpful. And so I would undo as much of that as you possibly can, because if you're going to beat the Chinese, you have to do it pretty quickly. So you have to have an economy that is robust and active and going crazy and innovative. And you have to have, I think, this energy independent to unwind our political dalliances with countries we may or may not want to have relationships with, number two. So I'd start with those two and then start this process of reform the government. Here's the problem with doing this on the debt limit, right? And this is why I think this is a process. We can say we're going to cut X amount, and this is great. I think we spend way too much money. We borrow it from places like China to pay for it, right? So we're continually powering our adversary here. But just go in and say, okay, rather than tell you how much we're going to cut, we're going to tell you how efficient we're going to make your department, right? Do you need all those people? Now, this may be the hardest thing in the history of the world, trying to get rid of federal employees. I'm just convinced we don't need as many as we have, because they have never adopted technology of the 21st century. And so I would start doing all of those all at the same time. The other one is I would start a volunteer, I think Americans and young Americans need to get involved in service to their country in some way, right? Think about their life now is so removed even from their neighbor. And you know, as a young guy going to boot camp and you went to, what do they call that in the Navy? Vacation. Nah, just kidding. I'm kidding. And so you think about, these kids have never really gone, and I say kids, they're young adults too. And I get it, but they've never been really required to go and do something that's different from them. You show up in the Army at boot camp, trust me, everybody around you is from somewhere else. They look different. They came from economic differences. You learn pretty fast about the value of America in those instances. We've lost that. And so I would do it a couple of ways, and I would start early on this and starting to have a conversation. We have not met our recruiting levels for the military, by the way, for the last 4 years. It's the equivalent of one Army division, not recruited. Think of that. Think what China's doing. Think where we're at. It's the lowest recruitment level we've ever had. And so what I would say is this: you don't have to go in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force or the Marines. That would be a great choice for you too. And by the way, I believe in the GI Bill and all of those things. But how about a reading corps? And I'm not a reading corps that the government manages, but a reading corps that these not-for-profits manage. So you're going to go into prisoners and you're going to take an hour a day, 5 days a week. You want $10,000 off of your student loan? That's great, but you have to volunteer to do it. And you can show up and you can give somebody their dignity back by working with prisoners today, so that we can try to get them back from coming back to prison, because we're going to give them the read. Same with high schools, middle schools. Think of this. This problem goes through every level of education. We just graduated, half of adults can't read at the 6th grade level that graduated last year. Think of that, young adults. We're going to try to reclaim them. So I would do all of this all at the same time. And these are things we can do, and I'm positive we can do. And I think most Americans can go, you know, I could be for that. You know, I'm a Democrat and I hate Republicans, but I could be for that. I'm a Republican, I hate Democrats. I think I can be for that. We need a little more of that in American politics versus I can't wait to score a point and make a bumper sticker and throw it on the back of my car, right? No, politics has not served us well. Thank you so much. Thanks for the question.
Comes from Karen Olmerdorsch.
Hi, Karen.
Hello, Congressman. Thank you for being in our beautiful state.
It is a beautiful state.
We
Love the
have
rivers. They're gorgeous.
we have legions of family members today who are caregivers for their elder parents or their grandparents or their siblings or their great-grandchildren. It goes on. And if you were elected president, what would you do what measures would you take to help these people who are saving our nation $600 billion annually?
Yeah, and here's the second part of that, if I may. It tends to be women. Women are caregivers when our children are young, and they're caregivers for their parents. I don't know what it says about my gender, but it is predominantly that burden is shifted to women. And one of the other, it's really interesting, we've been reading through some of these studies about the impacts of this economically, which is why if you are a single woman that's in your 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, you have removed yourself from the workforce in many cases to care for your parents, right, or grandparents or your other siblings, and it's had a huge negative impact on the finances of women in their golden years, if I may. And so we don't know if we have I don't have the answer sitting here for you today, but what I do know is we're going to convene the people who are most close to this problem and find a solution for these women. And if you look at their savings, you can directly tie it to some family event that caused them to either leave the workplace or not get enough Social Security hours, whatever that is, and you can see their finances go down. It's quite stark. And I'm a data-driven guy. My argument is if we have data that we can show this, we will find a solution for it. Right? We have to get over the emotion of what it is and get to the data of it. How do we do that? I'm not sure yet. But I know that if we get the right data, we're going to solve this problem. Thank you.
Next question comes from Leonard Morrill.
Hi, Leonard.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good,
today?
sir.
Great. My question is this. Every candidate for the past number of years have always thought that there's way too many executive orders being used way out of it. Yet the first thing they do when they get in office is issue executive orders. One president more than the next than one. What's the first executive order you'd issue?
Well, it would be to open, again, getting back to that energy independence. They closed off a lot of the ability for these companies to get leases. I'd undo that. That was all done through executive order. And I'll tell you why they do executive orders. And I've watched every president do it, even when I was chairman of the Intelligence Committee. They get so frustrated with having to work with Congress that they go, the heck with this. I'm going to do this, and I'll do this, and I'll have this impact. And that happens. I don't know if I can see that changing anytime soon other than this. I think Congress has abdicated its responsibility for 30 years. They keep doing a little bit of bills and then throwing it over to the rules and regulator writers, right? And so the bill is 10 pages, the rules and regulation are 1,000 pages, right? And I don't even know who reads all that. And so my argument is Congress needs to get back to the business at hand. And if we did that, I think that they could actually be part of the solution versus now I think they're part of the problem. I believe that every chairman shouldn't be chairman if you can't do an authorization bill for whatever department you're responsible for. You go down the list of chairmen that actually have done an authorization bill, and it's this is inside baseball, but it makes Congress run better. It means you have to sit in a hearing versus going on TV, but sit in a hearing, and you have to ask questions, and you have to understand the budget. You have to understand what they're asking to spend the money on, where they're spending the money, and should they be spending the money on it. That really doesn't happen now. It all gets pushed to the Appropriations Committee, and they just how much money do you need, and that's what they give you. When I did this, I was the first, as the chairman, we hadn't had a regular operating budget, and it was $78 billion. Can you imagine doing this in a business? I mean, you wouldn't be in business very long, right? They didn't have an authorization budget for this. So we went through, we were able to find billions of dollars, and we did this in a bipartisan way, by the way, billions of dollars at the height of the war on terror, in money we thought that we could save and not nick any muscle or bone, right? Because remember, at that time we were just pouring. If you said the word terrorist, you got, people showed up with wheelbarrows full of cash, right? And it was the right decision, right? We wanted to solve this problem, but we were wasteful. So, one of the things that I would do is try to re-engage Congress in doing their job, I mean, if you think about how many bills that they actually vote on that they've worked through this committee process. Normally, it's these big, giant, they call them omnibus, I can't even say it. That's how confusing it is. These massive bills, spending bills. They don't know what's in there because it's never gone through the committee process, really. And so I would encourage, you can't, obviously they're their own branch. I would encourage them to do the right thing, sit down with the departments. That would actually help the President of the United States if you do it right. Again, if not everything is, I got to choke you out over every point, but hey, we're going to get government working the way it's supposed to work, for people, not against people. I bet you'd be surprised. Now, being a legislature shouldn't mean that you're on TV that much. You should actually be in committees. It shouldn't be all that exciting. You're going to have to negotiate and argue over T's and paragraphs and how much and when and not. that's not as exciting as, saying something outrageous on Twitter and having 100 new people jump on my Twitter account. But we got to get back to that. And the reason we have to get back to that, again, we have this near-peer adversary moving out and saying, I want a piece of you. That's China. They want a piece of our economy going forward. We have to get back to that.
Thank you.
So that being said, I might sign 1 or 2 executive orders. Like that.
Well, Congressman Mike Rogers, we appreciate your time. You're hitting the 30-minute mark on the nose here,
Hey, I
just
love
like
that.
the old TV guy that used to host the show. So
Yeah,
I
thank
appreciate
you.
that.
Yeah.
So thank you to Congressman Rogers,
Thank
and
you.
thank you to you, and thank you to all of you watching on our mobile app and website. This has been Conversation with the Candidate with former Congressman Mike Rogers.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with me.